Julie stood frozen in the living room doorway, her hand still on the knob as if it might anchor her in reality. Jackson, the 6-foot-tall man she'd married less than a year ago, sat on the edge of their sofa, like a portrait of sweetness. His knees were together, hands folded primly over a pastel pink cardigan with tiny pearl buttons. Beneath it, a floral dress with ruffles at the hem swished gently as he shifted. White tights with delicate lace trim hugged his long legs, and his shiny pink Mary Janes caught the late afternoon sun. A colourful bow headband framed his freshly bleached white hair, making him look like the grandmother in some impossibly cheerful children's book. When he looked up, the knitting needles in his lap paused mid-click. "Oh, there you are, dear. I was just waiting." His voice wavered slightly at the edges, warm and lilting, as though every word was cushioned in tea and honey. Julie's mouth opened, then closed again. "Jackson, what are you doing? Why are you dressed like—" He chuckled softly, a grandmotherly laugh that rolled with mild amusement. "Don't make such a fuss. I told you, I'm just waiting. Always best to be ready for company." She stepped further into the room. "Jackson, you're my husband. You're 23 years old. You're not— Not what, dear?" He tilted his head, as if humouring a confused child. "Not a lady in her 70s. "Oh, Julie, you flatter me. I know I keep myself spry, but I'm not that young anymore." Julie felt her skin prickle. "Why would I marry an old woman?" "Because we love each other," he said simply, as if the answer should end the conversation. He patted her hand gently, the way a patient elder might soothe a nervous niece. Her heartbeat was too loud in her ears. She stepped back, scanning the room for anything that might jolt him out of whatever this was. The top dresser drawer, neatly folded floral nightgowns. Another, silk scarves, lace gloves, pastel sweaters. In the closet, dresses, skirts, hats with wide brims. She yanked a photo album from the shelf. Every page showed him as he appeared now, smiling in sun hats at picnics, knitting in armchairs, blowing out birthday candles shaped into numbers well past 70. There was no Jackson she knew, no 23-year-old man. "No," she whispered, fumbling for his wallet. The driver's license slid out age. 74. Gender, F. The picture matched exactly the person sitting in the other room. Her chest tightened. She stumbled to the desk and dug through the drawer, finding a folded sheet of official paper. Her hands shook as she read. Birth certificate female. Born 74 years ago. Same name. Same address. "That's not possible," she breathed. But there was more letters from the Social Security Administration, confirming his benefits. Deposit statements from the bank showing monthly payments labelled SAR Retirement. Every document, every scrap of paper aligned perfectly with this woman in her living room. She pressed a hand to her mouth. "No, I married a man. I know I did. I remember the wedding, the tuxedo, his voice, the way he picked me up and spun me around after the vows. I remember it." The knitting needles clicked again in the next room, as if mocking her thoughts. Jackson appeared in the doorway, smoothing his cardigan. "Now, dear, I think we should go out for dinner. My treat." Julie stared at him. "Dinner? Yes, but we must hurry. The early bird special ends at 4:45, and I don't want to miss it. You know how busy it gets after the retirement home bus arrives." He was already fussing with her coat, helping her into it with the brisk precision of someone who had done it 100 times before. "Jackson, She wanted to say you're not who you think you are. She wanted to shake him until the truth fell back into place. But the words felt flimsy in her throat. Every shred of proof she'd found contradicted her memory. "And of course," he added cheerfully, "bingo at the senior centre starts at 7 sharp. I like to sit near the coffee urn. The best gossip's there." He winked, patting her arm. Her eyes followed him as he bustled toward the front door, steps small and careful, one hand resting lightly on his hip. His head tilted, just so when he laughed a soft, tinkling chuckle that could have floated out of a church basement potluck. Julie hesitated, the cold edge of the doorframe pressing into her palm. "Am I losing my mind? Or did the whole world change except me?" Jackson turned back, smiling warmly. "Come along, sweetheart. You'll learn to appreciate an early dinner. There's nothing better than being home in your slippers before the evening chill sets in." She stepped outside, the tap of his Mary Janes on the pavement echoing in her ears, each one hammering the impossible truth deeper. The man she loved was gone, and in his place was a woman who had apparently always been here. Jackson had just set his purse on the hall table when he paused, pressing a hand lightly to his abdomen. "Oh dear, I'll have to nip to the ladies' room before we head out," he said, already bustling toward the bathroom with his careful, minking steps. Julie stayed in the living room, staring at the door he'd disappeared behind. The whole house seemed to press in on her, whispering its impossible consistency drawers full of dresses, photographs she didn't remember, documents that rewrote her marriage. She didn't know if she wanted to scream or cry or... The room tilted slightly. She grabbed the back of the couch to steady herself, but the dizziness kept rolling over her like warm water. A fizzing energy welled up inside her, giddy, restless, uncontainable. She blinked. Why am I even standing still? That was boring. She wanted to move, hop, jump, bounce, anything but stand here like a statue. A grin spread across her face before she knew it, and she began bunny hopping around the room, arms flailing, landing with satisfying thumps on the carpet. It didn't matter that she still had her adult woman's body. In her head, she was 5 years older boy, and every fibre of her being was thrumming with that wild, playful energy. The bathroom door creaked open. Jackson emerged, drying his hands on a pink hand towel. He stopped mid-step when he saw her bounding across the living room. His face softened into a smile that carried both fondness and that faint, scolding tone older women reserve for rowdy grandchildren. "Oh my, you shouldn't be wearing your mother's clothes," he said with a teck, as though it were the most natural observation in the world. Before Julie could respond, if she even wanted to, Jackson took her gently but firmly by the arm. "Come along, dear. Let's get you into something more suitable." She giggled and hopped alongside him into the bedroom, bouncing once onto the bed before he could stop her. Jackson opened a drawer and pulled out clothes she was sure had never existed in their home before. A cozy navy blue hoodie covered in cheerful cartoon characters, white cotton underwear printed with colourful superheroes, bright red crew socks with smiley faces, and a sturdy pair of navy sneakers with white soles and Velcro straps. "These will do nicely," he said, laying them out in a neat row. "Now, let's get you changed." "No more of this big girl attire for you, Julie wriggled into the outfit without protest. Why would she? It was perfect for running, jumping, climbing trees, all the best things in life. She didn't even notice the absurdity of her large frame stuffed into clothes, clearly meant for a child. "Now, don't forget your sneakers," Jackson said, crouching with some effort to fasten the Velcro straps, his motions careful and precise, as if dressing a fidgety grandchild was part of his daily routine. As they walked out to the car, Julie practically skipped beside him, chattering non-stop. "Can I have chocolate milk for dinner? And French fries? And maybe a milkshake too? Oh, and can we get chicken nuggets? And do they have ice cream? I want ice cream after. And maybe a toy if they have toys." Jackson smiled indulgently, patting her arm. "We'll see, dear. We'll see." When they reached the car, he opened the back door. "Safety first," he murmured, guiding her into a booster seat. Where had that even come from? And fastening the straps snugly across her lap and shoulders. Julie squirmed, but not out of annoyance. She was just buzzing with energy, legs swinging, eyes wide. Jackson settled into the driver's seat, adjusting the mirror so he could glance back at her. There we go. All safe and sound. He started the engine, the hum of the car, mixing with Julie's rapid-fire questions about dessert and toys, and whether they could go to the park afterward. And as they pulled away from the house, the only thing more surreal than the sight of a 6-foot-tall grandmother driving with perfect posture was the complete, unwavering certainty in both of their minds that this was exactly who they had always been. The hostess at the little family restaurant beamed at them as they walked in. "Table for two?" she asked, her eyes sweeping over Jackson in her pastel cardigan and bow headband, then down to Julie in her cartoon hoodie and red socks. She didn't even blink. "Yes, dear," Jackson replied, voice warm and fluttery. "Somewhere nice and quiet for me and my grandson." Julie didn't even flinch at the word grandson. The hostess led them to a booth near the window. No sooner had they sat than a waitress appeared, setting down a glass of water for Jackson and, for Julie, a bright plastic cup with a straw and a wrapped set of crayons. She slid a puzzle-themed placemat toward Julie. "Here you go, sweetie. You can colour while you wait." Julie grinned, already peeling the crayon wrapper away. "Thanks." Jackson excused herself after a few minutes. "I'll just pop into the ladies' room," she said, rising with the careful grace of someone guarding their knees. Then she paused, looking back at Julie. "On second thought, you'd better come along, dear. I wouldn't want you wandering off." Julie obediently followed, bouncing along the tiled floor. Inside, Jackson pointed to the side. "Now, Just wait here by the stall door while I take care of things. Julie tried. She really did. But standing still was unbearable. Soon she was bunny hopping between the sinks and the stalls, her sneakers squeaking on the tile. When Jackson emerged, adjusting her cardigan, she caught sight of Julie hopping past another woman who had just entered. Jackson gave the woman a rueful, apologetic look, one that clearly said children. What can you do? The woman responded with a small, knowing smile. Jackson guided Julie to the sinks, washed her hands with meticulous care, and freshened her lipstick in the mirror, pursing her lips just so. Back at the table, Jackson ordered for both of them, without hesitation. I'll have the fillet of sole, deer, with steamed vegetables. And for him, she tilted her head toward Julie a hot dog with fries. Julie didn't argue. When the food came, she dug into the hot dog like she'd never eaten before. Ketchup streaking her fingers, a smear of mustard on her chin, and a glob of relish on her hoodie. She sucked the salt from her fingers between bites. Jackson ate the sole with tiny, deliberate mouthfuls, her lips barely parting, like she was protecting delicate dentures. She paused often to dab her lips with a napkin, and then, without warning, something shifted. It wasn't gradual. One moment, Julie was licking ketchup from her knuckles and humming softly to herself. The next, she was sitting bolt upright, staring at the crumpled hot dog bun in her hand. What the hell am I doing? Her eyes shot across the table. Jackson, mid-bite, froze as well. His wide eyes locked on hers, the pink cardigan suddenly feeling heavy on his shoulders. They both looked down at themselves, the clothing, the food, the scene, and then at each other. Oh my God, Julie whispered. Her voice was her own now, not the high-pitched chatter of a little boy. Jackson, what are you wearing? He blinked rapidly, the bow headband slipping slightly. What am I, Julie? What the hell am I wearing? And why are you dressed like a 5-year-old? She stared at the crayon in her hand, at the sticky red stains on her fingers. I don't know. I was colouring and hopping, like a kid, Jackson finished, his voice low and horrified. They sat there in stunned silence, surrounded by the clink of silverware and the murmur of other diners who paid them no mind. Everything around them still looked perfectly normal, but the reality of what they'd just been doing loomed like a heavy shadow. Julie's stomach churned. Jackson's fingers twitched toward his napkin, then dropped it as though afraid of what he might find next. The waitress arrived with a smile. Everything tasting okay? Neither of them could answer. Julie's chair screeched against the tile as she half rose. We need to get out of here now. Jackson was already shifting toward the edge of his seat, his bow headband slipping forward. But then he froze, glancing at the check sitting neatly on the table. I haven't paid, he muttered. Julie stared at him. Are you serious? Forget it. I am not getting arrested, he hissed, especially dressed like this. He gestured at the cardigan, the dress, the tights, as if they were a criminal liability. We pay. We leave. Fast. With trembling hands, he reached into the pastel pink purse sitting beside him. The leather felt unfamiliar, foreign, yet somehow his fingers knew exactly where the zipper was. The sound of it opening seemed loud in the quiet booth. Inside was a neat little wallet, soft from use. Jackson flipped it open, searching for his credit card, but the first thing that slipped out was a plastic rectangle that made his stomach lurch. ARP member. His name printed cleanly beneath the logo. What the hell? He murmured, flipping further. The driver's license caught his eye next. He pulled it free, and the world tilted. The picture showed him in a blouse, makeup carefully applied, the bow headband perched perfectly. Age, 74. Gender, F. This isn't, his voice faltered. Julie leaned closer. What? But he didn't answer. He kept going through the wallet, finding tucked behind the ID a little row of photos wallet-sized snapshots, glossy and fresh. In every one, he was wearing a modest dress, always smiling, always the grandmother figure. Beside him, in picture after picture, was Julie, except she was never herself. She was always dressed like a little boy. One photo showed them at the park, grinning beside a bright red slide. Another had Julie on the grass, roughhousing with a group of actual little boys, her hair cropped short, her hoodie smudged with dirt. Another showed Jackson surrounded by women at the senior centre, their arms draped warmly over each other's shoulders. And then the one that made his hand freeze mid-flip Julie at a swimming pool, just a pair of boys' swim trunks, damp hair plastered to her forehead, flip-flops on her feet, a plastic pail in hand. Her smile was unguarded, carefree happy. Jackson's breath caught. "What?" Julie asked again, sharper this time. Wordlessly, he slid the stack of photos across the table. She stared, flipping through them, her fingers moving slower with each one. In the back of the wallet were a couple of laminated summer passes for the city pool. She picked them up, scanning the printed names and ages. Julie, age 5. Jackson, age 74. Julie's throat tightened. She looked up, her eyes meeting Jackson's. "How long?" Her voice cracked. "How long has this been going on?" Neither of them had an answer. The waitress passed by, smiling as if nothing were wrong. "Dessert tonight, or just the check?" Jackson slid his credit card at least that looked normal onto the table with a shaking hand. "Just the check," he muttered, eyes still fixed on the summer passes. Julie shoved the photos back toward him, like they might burn her fingers. Her pulse was loud in her ears, and she felt the room's air press tighter and tighter around them. The thought came unbidden, unwelcome. What if it's always been like this? What if this is the truth, and everything I remember is the lie? Jackson didn't look up when the bill was processed. He just signed the receipt quickly, stuffed the wallet back into the purse, and slid out of the booth. Julie followed, still gripping the passes in her hand as if she couldn't let them go. The world outside was unchanged normal people, walking, talking, cars passing, but it felt like a backdrop in the wrong play. The cool evening air hit Julie like a slap. She could still taste the ketchup on her lips, could still feel the clammy plastic of the crayon wrappers in her fingers. They walked quickly toward the car, the heels of Jackson's shiny Mary Janes clicking against the pavement. Julie's muscles itched to bolt a run, not with the giddy energy of a 5-year-old, but with the desperate speed of a grown woman fleeing danger. But Jackson's hand closed around hers, surprisingly firm. "We have to keep calm," he murmured, glancing around as if the quiet parking lot were full of eyes. At the car, Julie made for the passenger seat. "Julie," Jackson said, voice low but unyielding, "you'll have to sit in the safety seat. We have to keep up appearances." Julie stared at him. "You cannot be serious." But the look in his eyes said he was. The booster seat in the back seemed to radiate inevitability. With a bitter exhale, she climbed in, her knees pressed uncomfortably high, as Jackson buckled her in with the efficiency of long habit. Once behind the wheel, Jackson pulled smoothly onto the road. His hands, veined and delicate-looking in the lamplight, gripped the steering wheel at perfect 10 and 2. "We're going to the senior centre," he said matter-of-factly, "to play bingo." Julie blinked. "Are you crazy?" She snapped, the seatbelt digging into her shoulder. "I'm telling you," Jackson said, eyes fixed on the road, "if we ever want our lives to return to normal, we have to go and play bingo. And win a bingo." Julie stared. "That's the dumbest—" "I don't know how I know," Jackson cut in, "but I do know. I'm sure of it." She opened her mouth to argue, but the certainty in his tone was unnerving. It wasn't confidence, it was conviction, like he was reciting something he'd been told by some higher, undeniable authority. The senior centre was lit up like a beacon, its parking lot already dotted with sensible sedans and boxy vans. Jackson parked neatly between two, then came around to unbuckle Julie from the booster seat as if nothing were strange. Inside, the air was warm and faintly scented with coffee and perfume. The hum of conversation wrapped around them. Jackson. A plump woman in a navy dress called from across the room, her eyes crinkling with joy. Jackson beamed, leaning in to give her a peck on the cheek. "Oh, Marlene, you're looking lovely as ever," he said in that gentle, fluttery voice. He moved from woman to woman, greeting them with air kisses, soft pats on the arm, and comments about their blouses or hair. Each time he gestured toward Julie. "This is my grandson." Julie could feel her jaw tightening. "Isn't he adorable?" One woman cooed, cupping Julie's chin. Another pinched her cheek lightly. "Such a handsome young man." Julie forced a stiff smile, heat crawling up her neck. They believe this. Every single one of them. Jackson's hand rested lightly on her shoulder as he continued his circuit of greetings. The women welcomed them into the circle with warmth, no trace of doubt in their eyes. Somewhere, at the far end of the hall, she could hear the unmistakable rustle of bingo cards being shuffled. Jackson leaned down to murmur in her ear, "This is it, Julie. We play, we win, and maybe, just maybe, we'll wake up from this." Julie wasn't sure which was worse, the thought that he might be wrong, or the thought that he might be right. Jackson guided Julie through the crowded senior centre, the smell of coffee, lavender hand lotion, and slightly overcooked vegetables hanging in the air. "This is Mrs. Dorrance," Jackson said warmly, kissing an elderly woman on both cheeks like he'd done it his whole life. And this is her granddaughter, Victor. Julie blinked. The granddaughter was a small, wiry child in a lavender romper with matching flats, her brown hair in neat pigtails, but her eyes had the wary, calculating look of someone who'd been through more than recess. "I've got to powder my nose," Jackson said with a little flutter of his fingers, and left for the ladies' room. As soon as he was out of earshot, Victor leaned close and said in a low voice, "First time?" Julie glanced around, unsure. "Yeah." Victor nodded grimly. "We've been stuck like this for 3 weeks now. No bingos in sight." Julie just stared, her throat tightening. Victor gave a humorless smirk. "You'll figure it out soon enough, but let me save you some trouble. Don't think you're the only one. There are more of us. I just don't know how many." Julie swallowed hard. "What happens if we don't win?" Victor tilted her head. "How old are you?" Julie answered automatically, 22. Victor's gaze sharpened. "I mean, how old does it say you are?" Julie's voice was barely a whisper. 5. Victor's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then you don't want to find out." Before Julie could ask anything else, Jackson reappeared, fresh lipstick applied, hands smelling faintly of rose-scented soap. Victor's eyes darted toward him. "If you don't win, you'll be going to kindergarten tomorrow," she murmured quickly, then straightened up, her face sliding into a polite, childlike smile as if nothing had been said. Jackson settled back into his seat with the same gentle ease as before, smoothing the front of his floral blouse and adjusting the little beaded necklace he'd taken to wearing since they arrived. His eyes had that calm, slightly distant shine again, the look that told Julie he wasn't pretending. In his mind, there had never been a Jackson the way she remembered. He was Mrs. Jackson, 74, and had been all her life. "Julie, dear, isn't Mrs. Dorrance's grandson just adorable?" Jackson said. "You want to play with him?" "Oh, look at this. Mrs. Kells brought her famous lemon bars." Julie clenched her jaw. "We need more cards. We'll have better odds if we get at least 2 each. Jackson waved a hand. "Oh, heavens, I'm fine with the one I've got. It's all for fun, darling. No need to get carried away." Fun. The word made Julie's stomach twist. The game began. The caller's voice echoed over the chatter of the room, but Jackson was busy swapping recipes with Mrs. Kells and talking about whether the centre's bridge club needed a few more players. Every now and then, he'd glance at his card, mark a number almost as an afterthought, and go right back to reminiscing about a summer picnic in 1963, as if he'd been there. Julie, on the other hand, hunched over her card like a gambler at a high-stakes table, her pen hovering over the paper, scanning the board with laser focus. Every number mattered. Every second ticked in her head like a countdown clock. And then, miracle, they were 1 away. 1. Julie's pulse roared in her ears. Come on, she whispered. Her knees bounced under the table. She dared not breathe too loudly for fear of breaking whatever fragile luck she had. Jackson didn't even notice. He was too busy complimenting Mrs. Dorrance's new brooch. I-28, the caller announced. Julie stared at her card, not the number. Her stomach sank. Across the room, someone shouted bingo, and the place erupted into applause. Julie sat back, the fight draining out of her. It was like watching the last lifeboat pull away from a sinking ship. Jackson reached over and patted her hand, the motion maddeningly serene. "Oh, cheer up, dear. There's always another game." Julie turned to look at him, this stranger, wearing Jackson's face, but none of his urgency, and felt a spike of frustration so sharp she had to bite her lip to keep from snapping. She wanted to shake him, to make him see, but instead, she just sat there, watching him drift back into conversation with the women, her own thoughts spiraling darker with each word she didn't say. Julie watched with narrowed eyes as Victor's grandmother strode to the front to claim the prize. It wasn't the shuffle of someone in her 70s, it was the purposeful, almost defiant stride of someone decades younger, like a woman who had just been handed the keys to her freedom. The thought twisted Julie's stomach. That meant Victor had gotten out, and they'd left, without even saying anything. When she glanced back at their table, Victor's chair was empty, the abandoned bingo cards still lying there. Julie snatched them up, sliding them in with her own, and the ones Jackson had barely touched. Speaking of Jackson, Julie's frustration was reaching volcanic levels. Jackson wasn't watching the caller. He wasn't even looking at his card. Instead, he was leaning toward Mabel, or was it Marjorie, clucking about that awful storm last winter, and how these hips just haven't been the same since. The other ladies were eating it up. chuckling, nodding, and tossing in their own aches and pains war stories. Julie hissed, "Jackson, your card." But he just patted her arm with a wrinkled hand, smiling in that serene, maddening way. Oh dear, there's always another number. Another number? They were one away from winning. One. She scrambled between her growing mountain of cards, trying to keep up with the caller's rapid-fire pace. Her eyes darted from one grid to another, scanning, checking, daubing, flipping, her pulse pounding like a racehorse at the gate. B7, the caller announced. Julie froze. Not on her card, not on Jackson's, not on Victor's. The room erupted in groans, then a triumphant bingo from across the hall. Julie's heart sank as she spotted the winner, an old man with a grin too wide, too sharp for his supposed age. Next to her, Jackson sighed wistfully and turned back to Doris to ask about her new quilt pattern. Julie wanted to scream. Would you like me to continue with the moment when Julie realizes Victor's win might be the key to escaping and she decides to follow them? Julie was still fuming over their loss when she noticed movement from the corner of her eye. An elderly gentleman, tall, wiry, with a cane he clearly didn't need for walking, shuffled up to her table and peered down at her with narrowed eyes. "Well now," he said, voice dripping with disapproval. "Why are you dressed like that?" Julie blinked. "Like what?" "Like a little kid," the man scoffed, giving her graphic hoodie and bright sneakers an accusatory once-over. "You ought to be ashamed of yourself, young man. No respect for—" He didn't get to finish. Jackson, who had been in the middle of complimenting Doris's lemon bars, suddenly froze and whipped her head around. "Excuse me," Jackson said in a voice so sharp it could slice bread. "Is someone bothering my grandson?" Before Julie could answer, the surrounding women straightened in their chairs like a flock of ruffled hens, eyes narrowing in unison. "Yes, we heard what you said," Mabel added, her tone pure scolding mother. "You leave him alone." The man sputtered, took one step back, and then, seeing 6 sets of withering stares aimed directly at him, retreated toward the coffee station without another word. Jackson reached over, patting Julie's hand with an almost grandmotherly tenderness. "Did that nasty man upset you, dear?" Julie opened her mouth, then shut it again. "Not really." "Good, because if he had, we'd have words." Jackson leaned closer, voice softening. "Do you want to leave, sweetheart?" Julie shook her head quickly. "No, I want to stay." Jackson nodded, settling back into her chair and returning to her chat with the women as if nothing had happened, while Julie focused back on the game and on the pile of cards that felt heavier with every passing number. Julie's concentration was razor-sharp. 3 of her cards were sitting just 1 number shy of a bingo, and 2 others were dangerously close. Her eyes darted between them as the caller's voice echoed through the room. Then Jackson leaned over. "Julie, dear, I need to go to the ladies' room again." Julie barely looked up. "Okay." Jackson frowned. "No, not okay. That man who was rude to you earlier is still hanging around. I don't want to leave you here alone." Julie's jaw tightened. "I'll be fine. I insist you come with me." Julie shook her head. "I'm not leaving my cards. We're so close." Jackson hesitated, clearly torn. Finally, she huffed, "Fine, but I'm making sure you're not alone." She turned to Doris, who was marking her own card 2 seats over. "Doris, keep an eye on my grandson while I'm gone." Doris smiled warmly. "Of course. Jeffy, you sit here with Julie." Before Julie could object, a boy who looked about 4 plopped into the empty chair next to her, swinging his legs under the table. His mop of blonde hair stuck out in several directions, and he had a permanent, curious grin. "Hi," Jeffy whispered loudly. "Do you like dinosaurs? I have a whole backpack of them." Julie gritted her teeth and nodded, eyes darting back to her cards. "I've got a T-Rex, a Triceratops, and a Stegosaurus," Jeffy continued, digging into his backpack and pulling out plastic figures one by one. He lined them up along the edge of the table, completely blocking Julie's view of 2 cards. "Jeffy, I really need to— Do you know which one's the fastest?" "Guess." Julie muttered an answer without looking up, only to realise she'd missed the caller announcing 2 numbers she actually had. By the time she found them on her cards, the game was moving on, and her momentum was slipping away. Jeffy, oblivious, had moved on to making dinosaur roars loud enough to earn glares from neighbouring tables. Julie sighed. Between Jackson's bathroom trips and Jeffy's prehistoric parade, she wasn't sure which was worse for her chances. Julie was just about ready to give up on this round, when the caller's voice rang out, G56. Her heart leapt. She slapped the number down on one of her cards and froze. The diagonal filled in perfectly. Bingo. Only, was it her card? Or Jackson's? Or maybe Victor's? Or even Victor's grandmother's? They'd all gotten shuffled when Jackson left. She didn't care. She bolted upright. Bingo! She screamed, the word bursting out so loudly that even the caller jumped. A few people clapped, a few groaned, and Jeffy let out a dinosaur roar in celebration. Julie hurried to the front table to claim her prize, a small paper bag tied with a ribbon. Meanwhile, in the ladies' room, Jackson suddenly felt different, lighter, taller. The mirror reflected his own real face staring back, wide-eyed. The powdery pink walls, frilly curtains, and vase of silk roses confirmed the horrible truth. He was standing in the middle of the ladies' room, looking like himself. He didn't wait to think. He yanked open the door, bolted out without so much as a glance at the shocked stares of the bridge club ladies near the hallway, and made a beeline for Julie. "Come on, we're leaving." Julie barely had time to tuck her prize under her arm before Jackson had her by the hand, dragging her toward the exit. They crossed the parking lot briskly, Jackson digging into his purse for the keys. By the time he slid into the driver's seat, his breathing was uneven. Julie climbed into the passenger seat, still clutching her bag. She turned to glance behind her, and her stomach did a little flip. The bulky child safety seat that had been in the back since this morning, gone. Completely gone. Julie twisted around in her seat, eyes wide. Jackson. The safety seat, it's gone. Like, poof, gone. Jackson's head jerked toward her. "Check my purse. My license. I want to see something." Julie reached between the seats where the purse usually sat, only to frown. You don't have a purse anymore, just your wallet." He grabbed it, flipping it open. His driver's license stared back at them, Jackson, in the floral cardigan, pearls, and wire-rimmed glasses, but the text read 23M. Julie let out a half laugh, half sigh. Everything's going back to normal. When they got home, the change was undeniable. No lace dresses or orthopedic shoes in the closets. No small sneakers or tiny hoodies in Julie's drawers. No social security letters stacked on the counter. No stick figure crayon drawings taped to the fridge. Just them. The only traces left were the clothes they had on. Jackson peeled off the cardigan, dress, and tights, tossing them in a pile before pulling on jeans and a t-shirt. Julie ditched the oversized hoodie and Bermuda shorts for her usual outfit. They both sank onto the couch, the whole ordeal feeling like some bizarre fever dream. Then, Julie's eyes widened. Oh, the prize. She dashed outside to the car, returning with the ribbon-tied paper bag from the bingo table. Jackson leaned forward as she pulled the contents out onto the coffee table. 2 circus tickets, a pair of clown noses, a bag of popcorn sealed in plastic, rolled-up colourful banners, a little kit of clown makeup, and a handful of tiny circus-themed toys. Julie read the print on the tickets aloud, grinning. Valid for anyone aged 5 to 74, boy or girl, man or woman, everyone has fun at the circus. Jackson just stared at the tickets for a moment, before muttering, "Well, at least they didn't say anything about turning us into clowns." Julie smirked. Yet.